The name is Bond. James Bond.
Hello and welcome back to the show. I'm Zain at Zains007fancast with my partner and editor Wilshie. Today we're diving into the new Amazon era of James Bond. Britain's longest running spy, cinema's suavest secret agent, a cultural icon who somehow manages to survive exploding layers, shark tanks and even the critics, and a global e-commerce and streaming marketplace that started life with a bloke selling second-hand books from his garage. We're in one of those rare moments in Bond history. Daniel Craig's era is over. No Time to Die gave him a send-off unlike any other, killing Bond on screen. It was shocking, emotional, perfect closure, and yet as the credits rolled, those four words appeared: James Bond will return. Yet, it has been 4 years since No Time to Die was released in 2021. We can only assume that Mr. Bond has gone on a very long holiday. Think about that for a moment. Bond has survived wars, betrayals, explosions, and countless assassins over 6 decades. But the idea that he could actually die, that's a shock to the system. And now we're at a crossroads. The Craig era is over and a new Bond is coming. Today we'll explore everything we know and everything we can reasonably speculate about Bond 26. Denis Villeneuve is confirmed as director, bringing his cinematic mastery to the franchise. Stephen Knight is writing the screenplay, promising morally complex storytelling and layered character development. And Amazon, now controlling MGM, has the global distribution power to shape the franchise's future like never before. Fans are understandably excited but cautious. There's a palpable tension in the air. Will Bond remain true to Ian Fleming's original vision? Will he be modernized in ways that some may see as too woke? These discussions have become central to the conversation surrounding the next Bond. To understand why this matters, let's reflect on the legacy of James Bond. Ian Fleming created Bond in 1953 with Casino Royale, intending him to be a complex, clever, and dangerously charming British spy. Over decades, countless actors, directors, and screenwriters have adapted Fleming's creation to fit the cultural moment. Sean Connery brought swagger and danger in the 1960s. Roger Moore injected humor and suave charm in the 1970s. Timothy Dalton brought a darker, more intense edge in the late 80s. Pierce Brosnan balanced spectacle and wit in the 1990s. And Daniel Craig, he added emotional depth, moral complexity, and raw physicality to a character many thought couldn't evolve. Now the challenge is different. Bond must remain iconic, yet also relevant in 2025, a world where audiences demand inclusivity, realism, and contemporary sensibilities, while still expecting the spy, the martinis, the charm, and the explosions. It's a delicate balance. Villeneuve's direction hints at a visually immersive, emotionally resonant, and epic-scale Bond. Knight's writing promises morally challenging narratives that could push the character into new territories, perhaps exploring the ethical cost of espionage, the complexity of global politics, or the fragility of trust in a modern world. And Amazon, they bring resources, marketing powers, and a global platform that ensures Bond isn't just a British icon, but a worldwide phenomenon. But let's not forget the audience. Longtime fans are protective of Bond's legacy. Social media is alive with speculation, wish lists, and debates. Casting, tone, and story direction are hotly debated topics. Some fear Bond will lose his traditional charm. Others argue he must evolve to survive. One thing is clear, the next Bond must honor the past while embracing the future. This is more than a film. It's a cultural milestone, a cinematic event, and the beginning of a new era for one of the most enduring characters in pop culture history. So in this podcast, we'll explore the legacy of Ian Fleming and the evolution of Bond on screen, the impact of Daniel Craig's era and how it shapes the next Bond, Villeneuve's directorial style and what it could bring to the franchise, Stephen Knight's approach to writing complex, morally rich narratives, Amazon's influence and the potential for multimedia expansion, casting speculation, fan expectations, and cultural debates. We'll break all of this down chapter by chapter, exploring every angle of Bond 26 as best we can with the information available, while also considering what might lie ahead for the spy who has captivated audiences for over 60 years. And with that, let's step into Bond 26, reflecting on Daniel Craig's era, the risks he took, the depth he brought, and how his Bond sets the stage for what comes next. Before we step into the unknown of Bond 26, it's crucial to reflect on the era that has defined modern Bond, Daniel Craig. His tenure wasn't just another chapter, it was a reinvention. When Craig was announced as Bond in 2005, the fan base was skeptical, to say the least. Headlines mocked him, dubbing him James Blonde, while some fans even started petitioning against him. Critics questioned whether a short, stocky, blue-eyed man could embody the suave, muscular spy conjured in imagination by Fleming's novels. And then Casino Royale hit theaters. Suddenly those doubts evaporated. Craig's Bond was raw, physical, and emotionally complex, a man of contradictions, charming yet dangerous, ruthless yet capable of vulnerability. From the opening parkour chase to his first poker face at the table with Le Chiffre, Craig's Bond wasn't just a spy, he was human. Every expression, every glance, every hesitation told a story. The action sequences were revolutionary. Think of the parkour chase at the beginning of Casino Royale. No CGI flourishes, no suspension of disbelief required. Craig's commitment to physicality made the danger tangible and the stakes real. Audiences weren't just watching stunts, they were watching a man pushed to his limits, bleeding, bruised, yet unyielding. Quantum of Solace 2008 polarized critics. Some claimed it was a disjointed or too short, but in reality it doubled down on Bond's grief and moral struggle. Vesperlin's death continues to haunt him. His thirst for revenge paints a darker, morally ambiguous picture, a Bond shaped not only by duty but by emotional scars. This era made clear that Bond isn't a one-dimensional action hero. He's a man wrestling with the consequences of a dangerous life. Then came Skyfall 2012, arguably the pinnacle of Craig's era. Mendes crafted a film that was both epic and intimate. Bond's loyalty to M, his confrontation with Raoul Silva, and the stunning cinematography from London rooftops to the Scottish Highlands elevated Bond into a narrative beyond espionage. Themes of betrayal, aging, and legacy became central. This was the film that proved Bond could be psychologically complex as he was physically compelling, a template Villeneuve could later take inspiration from. Spectre 2015 expanded the narrative, tying together Craig's previous films while sprawling and ambitious. It showcased interconnected arcs and cerebral villains like Christoph Waltz's Blofeld. The film reminded audiences that classic Bond motifs, high-tech gadgets, exotic locales, villainous masterminds could coexist with character-driven storytelling. Craig's Bond by now was both epic and intimate, action-driven yet emotionally grounded. No Time to Die 2021 brought Craig's story to a daring and emotional conclusion. Bond sacrifices himself to save the world, a bold narrative choice, unprecedented in franchise history. This act of selflessness and closure solidified Craig's legacy, a Bond capable of profound vulnerability, yet unmistakably heroic. The stakes for Bond 26 are now immeasurably higher. How do you follow an era that ends in literal death? Craig also changed audience expectations for action. Hand-to-hand combat, high-stakes chases, and realistic stunts became hallmarks. Bond was no longer invincible. He bled, he struggled, he suffered. This realism added emotional weight to every confrontation and redefined the franchise's physicality standard. Yet humor and charm remained vital. Craig's Bond retained wit, often darker, often cutting, as he navigated tense situations. He could diffuse tension with sarcasm, reminding audiences that no matter the stakes, Bond's signature charisma endured. Villains Evolved 2, Christoph Waltz, Leia Seydoux and Rami Malek portrayed antagonists with personal motivations and psychological depth. Bond's interactions with these characters weren't just action set pieces, they were character-driven battles of wits, strategy and morality. Supporting roles, M, Q, Moneypenny, were fully realized with personal stakes and narrative significance, making Craig's films ensemble-driven as much as they were about Bond himself. The Craig era also reshaped global audiences' perception of Bond. He's no longer just a suave, untouchable spy. He's a man confronting moral ambiguity, emotional trauma, and mortality. This depth raises the bar for the next actor and creative team. Villeneuve and Knight inherit a character whose emotional, physical, and moral complexity demands careful handling. In summary, Craig's Bond leaves us with several defining legacies: emotional depth and moral complexity, realistic, physically demanding action, complex villains and morally grey conflicts, humor and charm, retained amid intense stakes, overarching narrative continuity connecting multiple films, a willingness to take unprecedented risks, including the death of Bond on screen. Craig has set the stage for Bond 26. The next film must honor his legacy, maintaining emotional depth, spectacle, and moral nuance, while forging new ground for a post-Craig era. Villeneuve's cinematic vision, Knight's narrative ambition, and Amazon global reach intersect here, promising a Bond who is both visually stunning and morally resonant, yet unmistakably 007 with a license to kill. With that foundation laid, we move to Chapter 3, Amazon and Modern World Strategy, exploring how the streaming giant could reshape the franchise and bring Bond fully into the 21st century multimedia world. Amazon's acquisition of MGM in 2022 fundamentally changed the Bond landscape. For the first time in decades, a global tech and streaming powerhouse controls not only distribution but also the Bond library, every classic film, every iconic moment, and now the future of the franchise itself. Of course, the Broccoli family still has creative oversight. Michael G. Wilson and Barbara Broccoli have been guardians of the Bond legacy since the 1960s. They've carefully balanced tradition with modernity through the Craig era. But Amazon brings a new kind of influence, strategic, technological, and global. They think in terms of audiences measured in millions, platforms instead of theaters, and cross-media storytelling that transcends cinema. Let's break this down. Amazon has the resources and infrastructure to expand Bond in ways that Broccoli's never could alone. We could see a streaming miniseries exploring MI6's history, Young Q, or M's early career. Interactive digital experiences, gamers, where you play a field agent alongside Bond, solving puzzles and making moral choices. Global marketing campaigns tied to immersive experiences, VR tie-ins, and perhaps augmented reality scavenger hunts. Now there's a balancing act here. Bond thrives on exclusivity. One carefully crafted film every few years is an event, a cultural touchstone. Oversaturating the market with too many tie-ins, prequels or spin-offs, diluting the mystique. Fans might feel like Bond is everywhere at once, reducing the suspense, the anticipation, the singularity of seeing a new film in theaters. And yet, there's opportunity. Amazon can introduce Bond to new demographics, especially younger viewers who may not have been invested in theaters. A teenager watching Casino Royale for the first time on Prime could become the next generation of Bond fans. That's strategic longevity. But it's not just about reach, it's about tone and vision. Amazon is a company that thrives on franchises. Look at their Lord of the Rings series or Jack Ryan. They've shown they can manage high budget, serialized storytelling while keeping audiences engaged over time. Applying that to Bond could result in a rich, interconnected universe without necessarily compromising the standalone cinematic experience of Bond 26. Let's speculate. Imagine Bond 26 arriving in theaters, visually and narratively stunning. Meanwhile, a short prequel series drops on streaming, giving context to Q's latest invention, showing Moneypenny's early fieldwork, or even exploring a young 00 agent's first mission. The result, Bond fans would have multiple layers of engagement: cinematic, narrative, and interactive. Then there is merchandising and brand synergy. Bond has always had merchandise, watches, cars, gadgets, and now Amazon could integrate those into e-commerce campaigns with unprecedented reach. A new Bond watch drops alongside the film, available worldwide, marketed with precision algorithms, targeting potential buyers based on their interests. Gadgets that once existed only on screen could become consumer reality, tied to the Bond experience in a seamless digital ecosystem. Yet, the Amazonization of Bond series questions: will films feel corporate-driven? Will creative risks be curtailed to protect franchise profitability? Historically, Bond has balanced innovation with spectacle, but can a corporate giant maintain that delicate equilibrium? Villeneuve and Knight will have to navigate these waters carefully, ensuring that Amazon's influence amplifies the story without suffocating the artistry. Interestingly, Amazon's global reach may also affect casting and setting. Could we see more diverse locations and characters to appeal to international audiences? It's possible. Bond has always been cosmopolitan, but the new era may consciously reflect a wider global palette: cities, cultures, and actors that represent more than just London, Paris, or New York. This could modernize Bond's world while keeping him iconic. Finally, think about fans' expectations. The Craig era built a global fan base that loves Bond for his grit, charm, and complexity. Amazon must respect that while also attracting new audiences. It's a tricky dance. One misstep and the franchise risks alienating long-time supporters. But done correctly, Amazon could usher in the most ambitious, immersive, and far-reaching Bond era yet. So, in summary, Amazon's role is multifaceted: distributor, financier, brand strategist, and potential creative partner. They bring resources, reach, and modern storytelling experience, but they also bring scrutiny, corporate pressure, and the potential for overextension. For Bond 26, this means the film will likely be cinematic, ambitious, and globally resonant, but it also retains the core elements that have made Bond endure for over 60 years: charm, danger, spectacle, and that undeniable charisma. Denis Villeneuve is officially confirmed as the director for Bond 26, and for many fans, this is nothing short of electrifying. Villeneuve, of course, is known for Arrival, Blade Runner 2049, and Dune. His style is deliberate, immersive, and visually breathtaking. He doesn't just direct films, he constructs worlds. This is a fascinating choice for Bond. Traditionally, Bond directors from Terence Young to Sam Mendes balance spectacle with character drama. Villeneuve, however, is known for epic scale combined with emotional intimacy. Think of Dune: vast deserts, colossal structures, and sweeping landscapes, all framed to convey both grandeur and the psychological weight on the characters. Translate that to Bond. Imagine Bond standing alone on a cliff in Iceland, wind tearing at his coat, grappling with an impossible mission. The sense of isolation and stakes would be palpable. Villeneuve is also a master of restraint. Tension in his films is often built not through constant action, but through silence, framing, and pacing. In Blade Runner 2049, long takes allow the audience to absorb atmosphere and character emotion before the next plot twist hits. In Bond 26, action will certainly exist, but it will be punctuated by sequences where every glance, every micro-expression, every shadow on Bond's face communicates moral and emotional complexity. Consider the potential synergy with Stephen Knight. Knight writes morally complex narratives with rich character arcs, while Villeneuve visually amplifies emotional tension. Imagine a scene. Bond faces a morally impossible choice, perhaps saving civilians or capturing a villain. Villeneuve could frame this in a single, uninterrupted long take, letting the audience feel the weight of every decision. Every glance, hesitation, and reaction would be elevated to cinematic art. Villeneuve has also an incredible eye for scale. From the sand dunes of Dune to the neon-lit cityscapes of Blade Runner 2049, he makes enormous spaces feel intimate. Applied to Bond, high-stakes chases across frozen tundras, rooftops, confrontations in futuristic metropolises, and desert pursuits in Morocco could all feel simultaneously epic and personal. Tension in Villeneuve's speciality, films like Sicario and Prisoners, are slow-burning, meticulous thrillers. Imagine Bond infiltrating a villain's lair. The shadows, reflections, and camera angles create suspense long before the first punch is thrown. Action sequences become more than spectacle. They become storytelling devices that reveal character, strategy, and moral stakes. Humor and charm will remain. Villeneuve has demonstrated the ability to balance darkness with humanity. Bond's trademark wit, subtle sarcasm, and clever quips could punctuate moments of tension, maintaining his iconic persona while grounding him in realism. Sound and music also play a crucial role in Villeneuve's storytelling. In Dune, the score and sound design amplify tension and emotion. Imagine a Bond infiltration, the hum of surveillance technology, footsteps echoing in empty corridors, the faint strain of a Bond-esque orchestral motive. The environment itself becomes a character, heightening suspense. Pacing is another Villeneuve hallmark. He allows the camera to linger, letting the audience absorb narrative, emotion, and visual splendor. Applied to Bond, slow sequences could make action sequences hit even harder, as we feel the stakes and consequences leading up to them. Every confrontation is earned, every chase grounded in character motivation. Villeneuve's framing of character interactions is notable in Arrival. Conversations are symmetrical, deliberate, and charged with tension. In Bond, even a conversation with a villain, ally, or Moneypenny could carry visual weight. Every pause, glance, and subtle movement matters. Bond's iconic charisma will be amplified by this meticulous visual storytelling. Finally, consider anticipation. Villeneuve is finishing Dune Part 3, meaning production won't start immediately, but this delay could benefit the franchise. Careful planning, meticulous set design, and a film that's cohesive visually, narratively, and emotionally. Patience here could produce a transformative Bond film, one that balances spectacle with depth, tradition, and innovation. In conclusion, Denis Villeneuve directing Bond 26 signals a bold evolution for the franchise. Except epic locations captured in breathtaking cinematography, slow-burning tension and meticulous pacing, moral and emotional depth amplified visually, subtle humor and classic Bond charm, innovative integration of sound, music, and atmosphere. Villeneuve may be the director to redefine Bond, a cinematic experience that honors tradition while elevating the franchise into something profoundly modern and emotionally resonant. No Bond film is complete without a compelling villain, and Bond 26 promises to deliver. The villains in the Craig era were complex, psychological, and often deeply personal. Silva, Le Chiffre, Safin. each one a reflection of Bond's own morality and vulnerabilities. Now, with Villeneuve at the helm and Knight writing, speculation is rife about who or what Bond will face next. Let's start with the role of the villain in a modern Bond. Traditionally, the villain is both a threat to the world and a foil for Bond personally. In the Craig era, the villains were deeply intertwined with Bond's own story arcs. Silva tormented Bond emotionally. Safin became the embodiment of vengeance and moral ambiguity. The next villain will likely continue this trend, but with modern stakes, technological, political, or psychological. There's a lot of speculation about what form the villain could take. One possibility is a high-tech criminal mastermind, someone leveraging AI, cyber warfare, or global surveillance to execute a world-altering scheme. Villeneuve's visual style could make this feel immersive. Think long, 10 sequences of Bond infiltrating a tech fortress, neon lights reflecting in rain-soaked streets, every camera angle amplifying tension. Another possibility is a morally ambiguous villain, someone whose motivations are understandable, even relatable, yet whose methods are catastrophic. Knight's writing could give depth to a villain whose objectives challenge Bond's own ethical compass. In this scenario, the confrontation isn't just physical, it's psychological and philosophical. Bond may be forced to question the morality of his own actions, and the audience is drawn into that moral ambiguity. Location is always part of the villain's story. Classic Bond tropes, a remote island lair, a fortified skyscraper, a frozen wasteland are likely to return, but with Villeneuve's signature grandeur. Picture a villain operating from a sprawling near-futuristic fortress in the desert, or cityscape rendered in stark contrast of light and shadow. Action sequences will likely be slow-burning and meticulously framed, emphasizing danger and strategy rather than just spectacle. There's also room for thematic villains, those representing broader social anxieties. Modern audiences are sensitive to global issues, climate change, surveillance, authoritarianism, and technological dependence. A villain embodying these threats could give Bond 26 a contemporary edge, making the stakes feel relevant beyond the usual nuclear war or megalomaniac ambitions. Casting the villain is crucial. After the Craig era, expectations are high. Will it be a returning actor, a rising star, or an unexpected choice that subverts traditional villain tropes? Casting can define the tone. A charismatic, suave antagonist could create a psychological chess match with Bond, while a cold, relentless figure could provide raw physical tension. The villain must challenge Bond, both intellectually and emotionally. Let's also consider how the villain interacts with supporting characters. M, Q, and Moneypenny have all evolved into more than side characters. They're integral to the narrative. The villain may manipulate, threaten, or even coerce them, increasing the stakes for Bond personally. Villeneuve and Knight could explore these dynamics with tension-filled sequences where every conversation and decision carries weight. Fan speculation is rampant. Some suggest the villain could have ties to Bond's past, a former ally turned enemy, or someone connected to the events of Craig's era. Others predict a completely new character, symbolizing the next era of Bond and pushing the franchise into uncharted narrative territory. Either approach could be powerful, depending on execution. Action with the villain will likely be a blend of Villeneuve's style and Bond tradition, meticulously planned set pieces punctuated by bursts of chaos. Imagine a climactic showdown where every move, every gadget, every strategy is visually emphasized, making the audience feel the intensity and stakes. It's not just about explosions, it's about suspense, calculation, and moral consequence. Finally, there's the thematic importance. Bond's villain often mirrors the central question of the film. What is the price of power? How far can one go to achieve an objective? How do personal ethics clash with professional duty? Bond 26 will likely continue this tradition, using the villain as both adversary and mirror for Bond 26 himself. In summary, the villain in Bond 26 will likely be complex and psychologically layered, tied to modern threats and global anxieties, a mirror for Bond's moral and emotional journey, embedded in visually stunning high-stakes locations, central to both action and narrative tension. With Villeneuve's direction and Knight's writing, the villain isn't just an obstacle. They're a character, a thematic force, and the heartbeat of suspense that drives Bond forward. Expect a confrontation that is epic, morally complex, and visually unforgettable.